By 1916, the European continent was being bled dry. The First World War required an endless supply of men, attention, and resources, and that strain eventually reached deep into the quiet, pastoral Hungarian town of Cinkota. The military commissioners who arrived in Cinkota had a specific objective. They needed to commandeer stockpiled civilian supplies to feed the war machine, with a particular focus on finding petrol. Local townsfolk and Constable Adolf Trauber pointed the soldiers toward a large, abandoned estate on the outskirts of the village. It belonged to a drafted tinsmith named Bela Kiss, a man the locals remembered hoarding a massive collection of heavy metal drums. The soldiers unsealed the heavy lids, expecting to find fuel. Instead, they discovered the metal drums were filled with wood alcohol, acting as a preservative for the naked, drained, and folded bodies of strangled women. This discovery unmasked a massive graveyard built in plain sight. It forced an investigation into how a single man could operate a murder factory for years without the town or its police ever intervening. To understand how he stayed hidden, we have to rewind to 1912. Bela Kiss moved into Cinkota as a wealthy, charming tinsmith with a beautiful young wife named Marie. He seamlessly integrated himself into the tight-knit community, paying for local sick care and projecting the image of a respectable neighbor. Shortly after their arrival, the town received a piece of scandalous gossip. Kiss claimed that Marie had betrayed him, running off with a local artist named Paul Beccari and leaving behind a note that she was never coming back. Kiss played the role of the heartbroken, abandoned husband perfectly. The forensic reality was entirely different. Marie and her artist lover never left Cinkota. They were Kiss's first victims, murdered and buried right on the estate property, while the town offered the killer its sympathy. With his cover established, Kiss built a highly organized recruitment pipeline. Using the alias Hoffman, he placed newspaper advertisements targeting wealthy women, claiming to be a lonely bachelor seeking matrimony. This descending funnel chart shows the exact data progression of his operation. At the top, Kiss received roughly 174 marriage proposals from these ads. He accepted about 74 of them. From there, he managed to lure approximately 20 women directly to his estate in Cinkota. That final tier was carefully curated. Kiss actively romanced these women to assess their vulnerabilities, screening them to ensure they had no close family or friends who might file missing persons reports or ask questions when they vanished. We know his methodology thanks to women who narrowly survived. Louisa Rust, the daughter of a draper, recalled going to a flat with Hoffman where he offered to read her fortune over a cocktail. The drink was poisoned. She lost consciousness and woke up in a public park at dawn, her money and jewelry gone. Kiss ensured these surviving victims could never lead the authorities back to his actual residence. He took them on labyrinthine, roundabout travel routes through the dense streets of Budapest, completely disorienting them before they ever arrived at his door. Kiss was careful, but he was far from invisible. His killing spree continued, primarily because the local police ignored the evidence in front of them. When a hired housekeeper peeked through a keyhole and saw the suspicious metal drums, she reported them to Constable Trauber. Kiss told the constable they were simply stockpiles of petrol, and Trauber accepted the excuse without demanding to open a single barrel. The negligence compounded. After multiple widows were seen at Kiss's estate before withdrawing their life savings and disappearing, Trauber finally paid him another visit. Kiss calmly explained that Hoffman had actually invited the women and suggested the police follow up with him instead. Trauber agreed and left. It wasn't until Detective Nagy was put on the case years later that the obvious evidence was found. Behind a locked door in Kiss's home, Nagy discovered a desk full of correspondence with the victims, alongside a library of books detailing methods of poisoning and strangulation. Even when the full scope of the crimes came to light, the police effort remained lethargic. Rather than conduct the grim excavation work themselves, local authorities forced prisoners of war to dig up the estate grounds, to unearth the 26 bodies hidden in the gardens and woods. Local police apathy and gullibility effectively cleared the path for Kiss's prolific kill count. He operated in the open for years, only exposed once the war forced the authorities to finally look inside the barrels. Just as local suspicions in Cinkota finally began to mount, the geopolitical landscape gave Kiss a perfect out. He was drafted. He legally secured his estate with iron bars on the windows, walked out of town in a military uniform, and vanished. Nagy tried to track him down. Following a death notice, the detective traveled to a Serbian hospital where Kiss had supposedly died. The staff there described their deceased patient as a tall, blonde, blue-eyed young man, matching the description of a dead soldier named Makari, suggesting Kiss had swapped identification papers in the hospital ward. Kiss became a ghost, slipping through the chaos of post-war Europe. Years later, reports surfaced from the French Foreign Legion. A legionnaire operating under the name Hoffman had spent nights in the desert bragging to his comrades about how he used to strangle Hungarian women. By the time Nagy contacted the Legion, Hoffman was gone. The most compelling sighting occurred in 1932. New York City detective Henry Oswald was certain he spotted Bela Kiss, walking through the crowds of Times Square, navigating a dense American metropolis where an immigrant with a dark past could easily blend in. Police managed to trace that Times Square sighting to a Manhattan apartment building, where Kiss had reportedly secured a job as a janitor. When investigators arrived to question him, he had already disappeared. He was never caught. The man who drained the blood and savings of dozens of women was insulated first by a gullible police force, and then by a burning continent. In the end, his victims received no justice. Their deaths became a minor footnote,